Thanks for everyone that's joined so far. We're going to get started in about another minute or so, just kind of giving everyone a chance to sign on. But thank you. So far, we have about 70 or so folks signed up. So appreciate it. Looking forward to the conversation. Okay, good evening, everyone. I have 6:05, so I'm going to get started. My name is Kofi Annan. On the behalf of the COVID-19 Justice Coalition, which is a coalition made up of over 50 organizations from across the Commonwealth, I would like to welcome you to the COVID-19 Justice Town Hall. Just a week ago, the nation's sole focus was on the pandemic and whether or not states should reopen or remain closed. However, the COVID-19 Justice Coalition was one of the few organizations that saw the intersectionality between the virus and the justice system as yet another reminder of how Black bodies are being treated as if they were expendable. George Floyd wasn't just killed by a bad cop. He was killed by a system and a country that does not value Black lives. And that devaluing of Black lives runs through the veins of our justice system, our healthcare system, our education system, and every facet of American culture. As angry protesters pour through Virginia cities, and as the stay-at-home orders restrictions ease, it will be tempting to lose sight of the fact that COVID-19 is still killing thousands of people, especially in areas with high concentrations of Black and brown people. During this program, we would like to remind our audience that many of the deaths that occurred needlessly under the supervision of the Commonwealth of Virginia's Department of Justice. We will have a rich discussion this evening about the need to release as many people from jail and prison as possible. But we would be remiss if we didn't also broaden the scope of the discussion to also highlight other ways our racist criminal justice system is literally and figuratively squeezing the breath out of our lungs. With that, I would like to now introduce activist extraordinaire, Ms. Valerie Slater, who will serve as our moderator. Valerie leads the Rise for Youth Coalition, a Richmond-based organization that promotes juvenile justice reforms intended to keep young people out of jail and promote reform-focused alternatives. Thank you again for participating, and please welcome Ms. Slater.
Good evening, everyone. I am so excited that you all have tuned in to join us tonight as we launch the Virginia COVID-19 Justice Coalition's virtual town hall series. Tonight, we're going to be kicking this series off with a discussion about racial equity and COVID-19 in our detention centers and prisons, and broader criminal justice reforms that can come about from every tragedy that we have experienced during this COVID-19, before the pandemic struck, and even now in the midst of it, the continuing throes of tragedy that seem to wash over Black and brown communities. You know, Kofi has already mentioned, but I'm just going to say again, we cannot ignore what's happening in our country and even around the world right now in response to the vicious taking of Black lives. It's across our nation, this other pandemic. And, you know, I'm just going to take a moment. Can we just say the names? George Floyd, Marcus David Peters, Ahmaud Arbery, Sandra Bland. There are so many others. I unfortunately would take up too much time if I continue just saying the names. But I just want us all to sit with that for just one moment. We have a host of topics this evening and that we are going to be discussing. And I am so glad that I am able to moderate this conversation with two of Virginia's own powerhouses, leaders in our legislature who are unapologetically representing the people that they have been elected to represent. Delegate Jennifer Carroll Foy and Delegate Joshua Cole. Delegate Jennifer Carroll Foy has dedicated her life to serving others. As one of the first African-American women to graduate from Virginia Military Institute, a foster mom, a magistrate judge, and a public defender, Jennifer embodies the ideals of community, honor, and commitment in every facet of her life. During her time in the legislature, Jennifer has led Virginia's effort to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment, passed legislation to help combat Virginia's teacher shortage, and proudly supported the successful fight to expand Medicaid to 400,000. Did you hear that? 400,000 Virginians. She is a proud mother to two twin 2-year-olds, say that 3 times fast, and wife to her husband, Jeff, who she met her first week at VMI. Jennifer, welcome, and thank you for all of the amazing work that you are doing. Also, Joshua Cole, Delegate Joshua Cole, he is a pastor, a civil rights leader, and the delegate for Stafford and Fredericksburg. In 2019, Joshua Cole became the first African-American to represent Virginia's 28th district. He also currently serves as the president of the Stafford NAACP and will be joining us on a panel. And he is joining us this evening on this panel. Joshua Cole, thank you so much for being here and for all of the amazing work. You know, you would never guess that these are new delegates in the legislature based on the track record that they are already blazing in our halls of our General Assembly. So again, welcome to you both. We'd like to go ahead and kick this off, and let's go ahead and let's get this conversation started. Delegate Foy, why don't you go ahead and give us your opening remarks?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Valerie, for that wonderful introduction. And I want to thank everyone on this call and thank you all for joining us. We're here to have the all too important conversation about race and the mass incarceration of Black bodies and the killing and slaying of Black men and women due to racial injustice and the historical and systemic inequities built into our systems intentionally. And we are now seeing the consequences of that. So one of the things I do like to take away is that I always try to be optimistic and look at the silver lining. And if nothing else, one of the reasons that the Voting Rights Act was recently gutted is because the Supreme Court said, because we had a Black president, we are now in a post-racial society. And if nothing else, this time shows us that we are definitely not. The inequities of COVID-19 and how Black people and brown people are bearing the brunt of contraction and mortality, when we're seeing, you know, up close and personal, this voyeuristic view firsthand, the unrepentant killing of African Americans at the hands of people who are supposed to protect and to serve. I think that those conversations and those sentiments need to be null and void. So I look forward to entering this next General Assembly session, bringing forth more bold and progressive and daring bills to really address a lot of the inequities that we have in our criminal justice system, our healthcare system, our education system, and in our economy. Because it is my job, and that is exactly why I've decided to run for governor, because I want to ensure that I lift every voice and represent all of Virginia, and we all have an opportunity to thrive. And as long as there are racial barriers and systemic inequalities, that can never happen. So I'm here for the fight, and I'm here to have those uncomfortable, raw conversations to ensure that we get there. And I'm happy to be here with all of these advocates and these organizations to start the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Foy. Thank you for those powerful words. And you know what? You're absolutely right. Until every voice is lifted, until we are truly recognizing that every Virginian matters, Black Lives Matter. And so thank you for lifting those voices. Delegate Cole, please share with us your opening remarks.
Well, good evening, everyone. I pray that everyone is doing well despite these hard times. And despite all that's going on, I'm excited to join my colleague, Delegate Jennifer Carroll Foy. I'm excited to be here with the Virginia COVID-19 Justice Coalition and the ACLU Virginia. Thank you for putting this together to allow us to come together and talk about these issues. As we were campaigning to get into these historic seats, one of the things we kept talking about, I know I said it, and I'm sure Jennifer said it as well, that in order to have our voices heard, we have to make sure we have people who look like us and with our lived experiences in these seats. And so now that we're here, when we're talking about COVID-19, when we're talking about police brutality, when we're talking about the incarceration system, when we're talking about inequities in our education system, we now bring our lived experience to the General Assembly and these committee meetings. And it's been a long time since this has been able to happen. And as I've been sharing with people, don't think it's strange that right now we're dealing with this COVID-19 situation, that we're dealing with the police brutality situation, all while we have the largest amount of Black legislators in the Virginia General Assembly. That means that we have some work to do. As the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus, as Black legislators, as legislators of color, we see the inequities that are hitting our communities. We see the inequities that are hitting our Commonwealth. And it's our job not to just sit there and look pretty in Richmond, to just sit there in the chambers and look good, but we have to enact change. And that's why I'm so excited to serve with Delegate Jennifer Carroll Foy. As she said, she's ready to get back to Richmond. And I'm hoping if we get called into a special session that we don't have to wait until January, that we can fight to enact change right now. We have to make sure that we're putting independent community review boards for our police department and set up criteria when we put that in, that no former police officers and no retired police officers can serve on their board, that there's no more internal reviews going on. We have to make sure that we're holding them accountable. As it relates to our education system, we still have to fight against inequities that are going on. We look at schools down in different parts of Virginia. You look at right here where I live in Stafford County, the good parts of Stafford County have great schools. The bad parts of Stafford County have bad schools. So we still have to fight against all those inequities. And it's the great part that where we are right now, even in these dark times, even in these hard times, you have great people like Delegate Jennifer Carroll Foy, like myself, like Senator Jennifer McClellan, like Senator Ghazala Hashmi, who bring lived experiences that have never been able to have their voice. It's one thing to testify in a committee, but it's another thing to have that person who's actually writing the legislation and fighting on your behalf. And that's why I'm glad we're able to come to the table tonight to have these discussions, to talk about it. And as I've been saying this whole week with everything that's been going on, be careful and watch out for the legislators who are not talking. Be careful and watch out for the legislators who are not present, because those are the ones who have shown you by their actions how they really feel. The legislators who are out there, who are communicating, who are talking, who have their doors open, they're sincere and they're trying to help out. And so I want to make sure that we're here today to listen to you and see what we can do to fight forward and make sure that we adjust the system and change the system. The system isn't broken, it's doing exactly what it was designed to do.
Delegate Cole, thank you. Thank you so much. I tell you what, didn't I tell you we had a powerhouse panel? Didn't I tell you? My goodness, we have delegates who are ready to get to work, delegates who are already doing the work. I heard mention of the potential of a special session. You know, Kofi, I saw you kind of clap. Let me do the same. The very idea that we might come back, that we might pull our delegation back together, our legislators all back together to address these horrors that we are unfortunately experiencing right now in Black communities and behind prison walls, in education, and all of the ways that unfortunately Black lives are being, we're being told that our lives don't matter, but we're here tonight to say, oh, but they do. But they do. So, you know what, can we jump in? Can we just jump into this now? I think, you know, Monica, if I might just hear just a little bit from you as well. I see that you've not yet spoken, and I would like to just hear your voice and let folks know that you are there.
Sure. So thank you, Valerie. I think later on the agenda, I'll definitely have a question for our panelists, but just as way of introduction. So my name is Monica Reed. I serve as Director of Advocacy for the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. So we are an organization of both public and private, both public defenders and private attorneys from around the country, and we work to promote criminal justice reform at the state and federal level. We've been doing some ongoing work in Virginia, and the association is a member of the Virginia COVID-19 Justice Coalition. And so we're standing with their principles, we're standing with what they're urging, and urging in this matter that we really need to take action, and the action should be swiftly taken. So I look forward to the question and answer portion, and I will be back shortly.
Awesome. I just needed everyone to know just how they needed to know the scope of who cares. They needed to understand that, yes, we have delegates who are here on the line right now, who are talking and who are willing to participate in this conversation. We have advocates in this conversation. We have defense, the entire defense attorney. What is it is your call? I am so sorry.
The National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers.
The National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers.
Yes.
Recognize that we are not just playing with this thing. We need to get to work. There is hard work to be done. The COVID-19 pandemic has swept across Virginia, and we are now watching it ravage through our criminal justice system, through our prisons. And we need to do something about that. And so let me just kind of open the floor to say, how is it that we are going to do something about what's happening right now behind bars? We had the Secretary of Public Safety. He shared that there were up to 2,000 folks who were eligible for parole. We have had less than a quarter, less than a tenth of that many folks released. What's the problem? How do we fix it? What do we do about that? Let's just jump right in. How are we going to change what is happening right now with releasing folks and curbing the ability for this COVID-19 to continue to ravage through our prison system?
I guess I can go ahead and start. So for me, I know that as the first public defender ever elected to the General Assembly, this is something that I take very personally. So I represent people who are over 100% below the poverty line. And most of my clients suffer from mental illness or substance abuse, and a lot of them are children. And so I have several clients who are currently tested positive for COVID-19. So I understand intimately the urgency of what needs to happen. So with over 57,000 Virginians incarcerated in our jails, our prisons, and our juvenile detention centers, we have to act and act now, because we all know that there are hot spots. Once you have COVID-19 enter the prison system, the social distancing and quarantining for some places is an impossibility, and for others is ineffective. And they already have limited resources and medical supplies. And so to put more stress on those systems, it just doesn't make sense. So what I've called for are several things. One is to entrust the parole board to expedite hearings of geriatric and discretionary parole, where, as Valerie was saying, almost 2,500 inmates are currently eligible, and we need to expedite their process. There's a way that it can be done in a responsible way, done safely, and we just have to put our money where our mouth is and ensure that these things get done. There's also, the governor has the ability to grant clemency to inmates who are most at risk of dying from COVID-19, people who are 50 years and older, people who have compromised immune systems, and or grant clemency to those people who have like less than 90 days to serve on their sentence. Those are things that we can do. And as far as the juveniles that's currently incarcerated or in custody, Department of Juvenile Justice has broad discretion to release youth who are indeterminately sentenced. And so they can make determination that we're going to give you wraparound services. We're going to facilitate your release in any way possible, but this isn't the right place for you because your property crime or whatever may have you definitely isn't worth a death sentence. And that's what we're looking at when we're talking about COVID-19. And people need to understand and sense the urgency. And I've gotten some pushback. So one of the questions is why we haven't done enough. And it's because that tough on crime mentality is still rampant. And it's still an effective talking point. I can't tell you how many times in the General Assembly when a bill came up and we talked about equity and doing what's right, and then you have a particular Republican stand up and give a war story of one particular circumstance that may be egregious, but may not relate all of the facts because they don't really believe in rehabilitation. They don't really believe that people other than them deserve a second chance or opportunity. So that's what it's really about. And the acknowledgement that we have a two-system criminal justice system. Right? We have one for African Americans and other marginalized communities, and we have another one that works well for everyone else. And until we really fix that, that's where you see a lot of these sentiments of the lack of need and the lack of urgency, I believe, for some jurisdictions, their Commonwealth attorneys and their judges not moving with a sense of urgency to reduce prison populations. So that's where I am. That's what I've been calling for. That's what I've been fighting for. Been filing motions to ask judges to use their discretion to modify sentences, especially for nonviolent offenders and people who have sentences to serve, less than 90 days. Let them out, release them. And I encourage more attorneys to do more and to lean on them. And I applaud a lot of the Commonwealth attorneys throughout the Commonwealth, especially here in Northern Virginia, who's taken upon themselves, the Commonwealth attorneys taken upon themselves to reach out to defense attorneys and say, hey, go ahead and file this motion and I will not oppose it. I think your client should be released, right? That's what I'm talking about. That's what true justice looks like. And that's what we need to continue to encourage.
Thank you. Thank you. You're so right. You really touched on a point for me. You talked about juvenile justice. Rise for Youth. That's where I'm from. So young people, that's where my heart is. And, they had the largest reported outbreak of COVID cases. And now there hasn't been a single case of a child contracting the virus for a few weeks now. There have been a couple of other staff members who have contracted the virus, but I just wonder if anyone else looks at that and wonders, how is it that it magically went away, and did it really go away? And how do we look more deeply into that issue and understand whether or not there has been a true cleansing of the virus out of that particular environment while it continues to run rampant everywhere else in our nation. Just my own little sidebar thought there. And so, something else that you said, you talked about the poverty that your clients are experiencing. And when it comes to young people, when they are living in impoverished environments, when they are living in educational systems that are impoverished, there's no better way to say it. They're so inequitable. Joshua, Delegate Cole, you mentioned that, how there will be good schools in one part of town and bad schools in another part of town, and it's all within the same jurisdiction, and so kids who are living in what can be considered sometimes war zones, they're having education systems that are not giving them the education that they deserve. And they are watching all kinds of things happen. And then they begin to exhibit some of the very behaviors that they are living and having to experience on the daily. And then we criminalize them for acting in the very ways that they have been inundated with time and time and time and time and day after day, again and again, with no relief in sight. And so I just want to agree with you wholeheartedly and say, until we truly begin to make changes that begin at the very root, we aren't going to begin to see any changes in the way that young people are learning and experiencing and acting in their environments. And we can't continue to criminalize them. Delegate Cole, let's draw you on in here. We need to hear from you, sir. When we look at what's going on behind bars, when we look at how COVID-19, how it's impacting Black communities at a rate that is causing their death and their infection at a rate that is disproportionate to their how many of us there are in community, we are exponentially then being infected and dying from this disease. What say ye, sir?
Yeah, I really, one thing I love doing is letting people know when I don't know stuff. Because you get a lot of politicians that get up here and will talk fluff and tell you what they think, but they really don't know information. And so I really appreciate Delegate Jennifer Carroll Foy being here, bringing on her expertise about the penal system and what's going on. And so we've been pressing forward. We sent letters to the governor calling for early release, calling for the Department of Justice to do such. And we see, I think the last time I checked the numbers, and a lot has been going on, so I haven't checked the numbers, but out of the 2,000 or so inmates that were cleared to be released, it was just under 200 that were released so far. And another big thing that we have to focus on, since we're talking about just the Black community and the community of color, we don't have access to information like everybody else has. And so I took it upon myself to reach out to our regional Virginia Department of Health and just say, hey, what information can you give my office so I can give out to our people? And with everything that's going on, you would think that they were doing a good job of sharing the information. And we're still finding that there's still communities that miss out and aren't being reached out to. And so we have to make sure that we get that information. And when we find out, again, it's important to have people who look like us in these seats, because when you find out that your cousins or your friends and auntie and them aren't getting the information, that falls on me to say, I'm gonna make sure they get that information. And so we reached out to the Virginia Department of Health. We got some information, and I'm gonna take the blame. I haven't disseminated the information just yet because of everything that's been going over the past 2 weeks. But we wanna make sure that our people get the information. Where are the testing locations in our communities? Where's the closest testing location that you can get to? And so when I found out that CBS was partnering to do free testing, the first thing I did was put it on our Facebook page so that people could find out. We have to make sure we're giving the information to our communities. And that's why it's so important. And then we have to go the extra step. Maybe everybody doesn't have Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. How can you reach out to them? Send out emails in your newsletters. I know Delegate Jennifer Carroll Foy and Delegate Hala Ayala are great with their newsletters that they send out on a frequent basis. And we have to make sure that information is on those newsletters. And then when you send it out, make sure you're sharing with your friends to continue to push it out and share it to their followers as well. The way we do this by keeping community safe, even though we're supposed to be socially distant, we may be socially distant in person, but we have to make sure that we're really close together in this time right now. And so that's how I believe we as communities of color and people of color help each other out. You know, the government and those who are in power may not always look out for us when they're supposed to. And it falls on us, especially as leaders in the community, Black leaders, community leaders of color, that once we get the information, we push it out and we share it out. When you know better, you do better. And that's what I'm going to try and make sure I'm committing myself to do, making sure that our people get that information.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. You know what? We've got to talk about these last 2 weeks. We must talk about these last 2 weeks. We have seen how education systems disenfranchise our young people. We have seen how the distribution of funding and job availability and healthy food choice availabilities have all had an impact on our communities. We have seen the result of all of these impacts through the COVID-19. But there's this other thing that is heavy on everyone's heart and on everyone's mind, you know, and that is these past 2 weeks, right? We have, everyone is outraged over watching George Floyd's life be stolen from him. His life was stolen from him. Everyone is outraged by that. But that's the culmination of everything that has come before, right? That's the culmination of everything that I've said. That's the culmination of all of the pushback that has been going on against those kinds of things. And it almost felt like a slap in the face that, no, we still have our knee on your neck. And How do we respond? How have you responded? And how do you encourage your brothers and sisters across Virginia to respond? Either of you, Delegate Foy
I'll,
or Delegate Cole.
I'll go first. These past 3 days, starting on, well, I guess 4 days, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Today I had to make sure I got back to work. But I've been out in the streets, not protesting, because the way I protest is by creating legislation to change things. But I've been listening. There are angry students. There are angry young people. There are angry parents. And as I've been out there in the streets, one thing I've noticed is I'll see maybe one or two other elected officials who'll be out there with me. But we have whole city councils, whole board of supervisors members who have remained silent. The city of Fredericksburg released a statement yesterday. They held an in-person outside town hall with the community. The mayor was there, the police chief was there, but other places have not issued statements. And that's why I said in my opening statement, watch out for the leaders who are not present and who haven't said anything. We also want to condemn anyone who tries to take this and over politicizes it. This is not an opportunity for you to get your cheap gains, your cheap shots, because you want to look for points to point at the other team. We ain't got time for that. And I want to be very clear that with me being on the ground, I am livid and I am pissed off. And I want to explain why. Because you have people who are not out there. And I understand if you're not a protester, that's cool. You don't want to do that. But before you open up your mouth and pass judgment on what these young people are doing, you need to listen to them and find out why they're so angry. And they're angry because they feel like they don't have leaders that listen to them. They are angry because they feel like the system is not working for them, and it's not. And they are angry because the cops will take selfies with them, will protest with them, and then turn right around and arrest them. And as someone who is trying to build trust in the community amongst the young people, especially young Black men, and our police system, we have to come to the table and we have to talk about it, and you have to listen. Don't tell them, well, this is my job to do that. You need to listen and validate how they feel, and then work together to find out how we can change the issues that we have. Now, I'm going to use a nasty analogy. What we're seeing right now is literally the head of the pimple being popped. And I'm using a nasty analogy because what's going on right now is gross. This is not just about George Floyd. This is not just about Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery. This is not about all those lives that have been shot down. This is, as you said, Valerie, the culmination of so much frustration and pent up anger. That when we thought that when our grandparents and our parents marched and fought in the 60s and the 50s and the 70s, that we were going to be okay, I didn't think I would be in a situation like this in my life. And I remember when we had the presidential election in 2016, my grandmother was watching TV in the living room, and my grandmother suffers from the onset of dementia. And she was sitting there, she said, no, no, no. And I said, what's the matter, Granny? She said, no, no, no. I said, what's the matter? She's like, I'm confused. It sounds like years ago. What are we doing again? And even in all of that, my grandmother realized that stuff was still wrong. And so where we are right now, I've been out here in these streets telling kids, I need y'all to get home. There's a curfew. I don't want y'all tear gas. I don't want y'all beaten down. I need y'all to get home, because we have a different route we can follow now. During the first civil rights movement, they didn't have power like we got today. We literally can make the legislation to change it and get it enacted. We don't have to sit in front of the president and plead and beg with him for hours and days. We don't have to deal with the president. We can enact change right here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And they are waiting for that. They're waiting for us to enact the change. And so for those friends of ours and those colleagues of ours who are watching this, or maybe watching this later down the road, if you sincerely care about change, get behind this legislation and vote for it. If you're sincere about Black lives like you say you are, then help us out. Don't scream all lives matter, Because if all lives matter, we wouldn't be in this situation right now. And I'm gonna stop because I'm getting all worked up, and I know y'all probably want to hear from JCL. So
Thank you. Thank you so much, Delegate Cole. Delegate Foy, please share.
So I'm supposed to come behind Josh Cole. All right. All right. So for me, the conversations that I've been having recently is people want to talk about the broken windows. And what I say is, don't talk to me about the broken windows if you're not also willing to talk about the broken Black bodies that's been left on our streets and on our corners. Not just this year, not just 50 years ago, for 400 years. When people want to talk to me about the looting, which I do condemn, I say, well, let's also talk about the looting of Black wealth, from mass incarceration to redlining to segregated schools. And if you're not willing to have those type of conversations with me also, then I can't hear you on anything else. Because we can always focus on some opportunities and to ways to improve. There's really no handbook or right way to protest, right? And so, like Martin Luther King said, you know, riots is the language of the people that's not being heard. And so we have to ask ourselves, well, why do they feel that way? And it's because they go to Richmond, they see the segregated schools and they see the child getting shot in the face while we're in session, right? They say that because they go to communities like Petersburg and they still see the inequities and the lack of economic opportunity. They know that we call certain Virginians essential, and the majority of them are Black and brown because they're on the front lines. But when they look at their paycheck, it says that they are expendable. That is the problem, right? That is the real essence of what's happening. And so when people think that all of the protests and all of the anger is really about George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and the many countless other Black men and women who have died due to racial injustice, I say not necessarily. It's also about the people who go into an elevator every day and have that woman clutch her purse. It's about being followed in the store or being told to buy and to leave. It's about seeing some schools, even during COVID-19, that can give out laptops during this crisis, and others that don't even have books for the kids to take home. It's about people working 2 and 3 jobs and still can't get by. And the majority of those people are Black and brown. So that's what this is really about. It is really about the boiling of systemic racism, discrimination, and oppression that has bubbled over and now spilled into our streets, and it's on our phones, and it's in our face, and it's on social media, and you cannot run from it because everything is quiet because you've been sheltered in place. You've been forced to stand still, and you've been forced to look at something that you don't want to look at that's uncomfortable, but it's the lives that so many people live throughout this Commonwealth in this country. So I hope to bring so many solutions. And like what Delegate Cole said, my protest will be through passing legislation. And so I hope to not have to convince people anymore from last session, where I brought forth a bill to address the Black maternal mortality rate. I brought forth a bill to end Black girl school push out. I brought forth a bill to increase the minimum wage. I brought forth a bill to chief co-patron the Crown Act, so brown and Black women can stop being fired for what naturally grows out of our scalp. And I had a senator walk up to me and say, Jen, we're sick of all these woke bills you keep bringing. So hopefully I don't have to have those type of conversations in the next session and the sessions coming behind it. Because now we know that we are not in a post-racial society. It has now been exposed, you know, the egregiousness of what's happening to so many people. But what's really offensive is that, yes, we can be angry about what's happening on video, but what about all those people and their injustices are not recorded? What about those individuals? So I look forward to bringing the solutions to ensure that we have a special prosecution team here in Virginia that stand ready. So whenever there is an officer-related killing, that there is an independent, thorough, and prompt investigation. And that agency is to be housed, or those attorneys are to be in the Attorney General's office, ready to go, who don't have those natural relationships that Commonwealth attorneys oftentimes have with law enforcement officers, which I understand because as a magistrate judicial officer, I was right there with them. And I have many officers who are friends, and I understand and I get the dynamic and the relationship, but that has to be taken out of the criminal justice process when we're investigating real crimes. I believe there should be a commission where they review all police policies and procedures and practices throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia, and it needs to be consistent. Because one of the reasons that the Department of Justice don't get involved as quickly as they should is there has to be a constitutional violation. Someone's civil rights have to be violated. And as long as there's vagueness and ambiguity in police practices, well, there's a way to run. There's a corner to hide in. But once you make that difficult, then you can bring down the federal government. You can have the independent agency of the special prosecution team, because it's not about justice. Justice is for George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and the countless of other people to still be living and breathing. That's justice. We'll never get that. What we're really asking for is accountability. That's what's lacking. Ending of the two types of criminal justice systems here in Virginia and throughout this country. And until we have that, we will never overcome this.
My goodness, my goodness. Powerful, powerful words. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Delegate Floyd. Now, you know, you said something there. You said, we are never going to have justice because those lives aren't coming back. But it is indeed time for accountability. And you have both, Delegate Floyd, you and Delegate Cole, you have both mentioned some things that you're going to be pushing for, and whether we get a special session or whether we have to wait for the 2021 session. But, you know, I'm really encouraged to hear that you have concrete legislation already formulated that is going to make real change happen. And I just want to let folks know, once again, please be well aware that these are two delegates who are not afraid of the fight. These are two delegates that have taken on the tough issues, the things that folks say, no, you know, you got to introduce that and get folks' appetite wet for it. And, you know, you got to get them to warm up to the idea of it before you can move that forward. And you know what? I am so pleased to be having this conversation with delegates who are willing to, you know what? We will move on what is necessary, and we will not hold back. We will not try to just stroke folks' egos. No, we're going to push through those things that need to come forth so that there is true equity and accountability in Virginia's legislation. So I'm so excited about that. You know, we have got to begin to have a conversation with the people. You all have put forward some really amazing things. And I want to just open the floor and allow questions from the folks. First question is going to come from Richard Walker. So if you could just share a little bit of who you are and go ahead and ask your question, sir.
Thank you, Valerie. I appreciate you two delegates being here in this town hall meeting. And I agree, you are fighters in the General Assembly, you know, and you're preaching to the choir with everything you're saying with the folk that are assembled here. But I implore you to get to your colleagues that are not out in the front fighting for legislation and fighting for change. There's a whole lot of, and particularly I'm speaking in the Legislative Black Caucus, that is just about pomp and circumstance as opposed to really fighting for change. With that said, I'm the founder and executive director for Bridging the Gap in Virginia. I've been doing this for over 10, 11 years, you know, fighting for change. I helped ban the box in place. I've probably assisted over 6,000 people get their rights restored. I've implemented environmental justice issues, which you both have participated in, the rallies and the marches, and I'm grateful to that. I currently have placed 10 individuals that geriatrics in housing in Newport News and Tidewater. You know, I'm seeking additional funding to get more people released. Adrienne Bennett, before she left, she sanctioned individuals to my organization, to my program, and that has continued to be a viable way for individuals to get released. These are individuals that do not have a home plan, that do not have family support or financial support. So I've been able to get financial support to get them into housing in the Tidewater area. So I'm grateful for the two of you. Now, the question that they gave me to ask you, okay, you'll be asking the first of three. As a coalition, we ask that as many people as possible be released from detention facilities all across our Commonwealth as safely and quickly as possible. In some places, we have seen arrests increasing and people not being able to social distance and stay safe. Local jails have been inconsistent, with some doing a good job releasing people who pose no threat and other facilities are not. Not to mention ICE facilities and the Virginia Center for Behavior Rehabilitation, where people under civil commitment are held. As of yesterday, through the special legislation to make eligible for release those in our prisons with less than a year left on their sentence, only about 1/10 of those eligible have been released. Those 226 people make up less than 1% of Virginia's prison population. This is clearly not enough to create space for social distancing and help keep people safe. What more do you think should be done? What more do you think you can do to increase the number of people who can be safely released from our detention facilities?
Yes, so I guess I'll go ahead and start. And so I think that I know that Commonwealth attorneys in Virginia are elected. And I know they're elected because I helped several of them get elected and recruited several of the fantastic Commonwealth attorneys we have in Northern Virginia. And so some of the ones that come to mind that I want to give a huge shout out, who's been doing amazing jobs, are Buta in Loudoun and Parissa and Arlington and Amy Ashworth in Prince William County. And Steve Descano has been a fantastic job, even though I didn't get to Steve till late, but I still support him. And these are Commonwealth attorneys who are doing excellent work. And so what you can do is they listen, and they are there to ensure that justice is accomplished. And so you can tell them that, hey, I would like to see the prison population reduced. So what are you doing? And they'll outline to you exactly what they're doing. And if you see any opportunities, that's when it's glaring, and you bring it to them. So some of the suggestions that I think you can propose is, can you ensure that when people are being arrested for nonviolent offenses, or who don't have maybe 5 or 6 failure to appears on their record, that they are released on summonses? That's something that can happen through the direction of the police and the magistrates and the Commonwealth attorneys working together to ensure that that happens. Because a person who stopped for, a trespass or something should not have to enter our criminal justice system when, we have COVID-19 in Prince William County. We have it in some of our juvenile detention centers. We have it in the Department of Corrections. We have it, pretty much almost everywhere. So asking for people to release on summonses, ask for Commonwealth attorneys to allow people to get what's called PR, personal recognizances, meaning that they're not given bonds. Because what happens is sometimes Commonwealth attorneys believe if I give them a low bond, then they'll be able to get out. Because some people don't have a lived experience of knowing that there are people who don't have $50 to their name. And I know them because I represent them. And so a $50 bond is in fact a no bond. And that client will sit there for weeks and months and now being exposed to contracting COVID-19. So allowing them to be released until their court date, because let's remember, they haven't been found guilty of anything. And so we have statutes in Virginia that says that if you are charged with rape, murder, or robbery, you can't get a bond anyway. But what about everyone else? Right? And so if you're safe enough to be released, if you pay $50, then you're safe enough to be released, period. And so ensuring that we're encouraging Commonwealth attorneys to do those type of things that's low-hanging fruit to help reduce prison populations, I think is helpful. And while judges are independent, I mean, there are, legislators you can talk to say, hey, it's been brought to my attention that some of these judges are, fighting back and pushing back on releasing a lot of inmates for whatever reason. And let your delegates and your state senators know, because we're the ones who certify these judges. And we have some who, are not doing what's in the best interest, or who are not being fair and equitable and independent and doing all the things that they should be doing, then they come to the General Assembly once a year and they have to answer questions about it, right? And so ensuring that your legislators know, ensuring that the Commonwealth attorneys know, and you make your voices heard and you lean in on those conversations, because I can tell you that the ones that I've seen up here, they do care and they will listen, but you need to make sure your voices are heard. And that's how we work collectively to get things done. And also the governor, push for pardons, push for clemency. Contact Brian Moran, who's Secretary of Public Safety. Let them know that you take these things seriously, that our children in these juvenile detention centers, their services is out there, their parents they can be released to. There are other ways to handle this instead of just retribution. It's about rehabilitation. That should also be a goal of ours. It's happening at the same time. And so continue to advocate, continue to push, continue to write letters and phone calls to your legislators, to the governor, to Brian Moran, the Secretary of Public Safety, and your Commonwealth attorneys so we can make real change happen.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much. Delegate Cole, would you like to follow up? Do you have anything to add?
I would just say I associate my comments with the gentle lady from Prince William County.
All right. All right. Well, you know what? You said a mouthful and then some, and you're absolutely right. We must hold those that we have elected, the highest seat in our Commonwealth, the governor. He has extraordinary power that he could use and that has not been used. We've got the Secretary of Public Safety, Brian Moran. Yes, we must write letters to him as well. And, and then the Commonwealth attorneys. I'm glad that you mentioned all of those that are doing great work, because we need to recognize who they are. And we also need to recognize whose names we didn't hear. And we need to reach out to those particular Commonwealth attorneys so that let's check their track record. How many folks have you helped to get out? How many folks have you made sure didn't get out? So you're absolutely right. That's both sides of what you have both shared so eloquently this evening. We need to see who's there and we need to see who's not. We need to see who's speaking up and we need to know who's being quiet. With that, let me go ahead and ask. We have another question. Kofi, can we hear what question you have for the delegates this evening?
Sure, thank you. So thank you again, Delegate Cole and Delegate Foy. My question is about accountability and transparency in the jail. But before I get to the question, can I just make a quick comment? Delegate Cole, you mentioned that the All Lives Matter phrase that obviously became a way to try to silence the Black movement of Black voices. I got to tell you, over the last couple of weeks, every time I bring up Black issues in regards to COVID or regards to police brutality, I've been getting we're all in this together. It's almost like it's become like the new All Lives Matter. It's intentionally meant to just say, enough with your Black issues. Everybody, is in this, and we're not all in this together. When you mentioned that, I just wanted to, it triggered something to make me say this. We have separate issues, and we do need to acknowledge them. If not, it's just a way to silence Black voices when we speak up. But to my actual question. So my question was about accountability and transparency as to what goes on in the jails. Jails, obviously, they keep people in, but a lot of times what people don't really understand is just how much they keep information in. There's a very little transparency as to what happens in the jails. Yes, we know that the CDC guidelines say you're supposed to do X, Y, have these different parameters as to how to protect people in social distancing and 6 feet and all this, but there's very little accountability and transparency as to like how we're actually keeping our the folks who are incarcerated in safe during this pandemic. So I just wanted to touch on that a little bit and try to understand what can we do to increase the accountability and transparency to make sure that for the people who we don't get released. Unfortunately, how are we making sure that they aren't suffering because, or even being put in solitary confinement, which has been another way to a solution or a band-aid to try to protect people? How do we know increase the transparency there?
I don't know if Jennifer wants to go first. That's your area of expertise, the whole criminal justice side. So.
Sure, I can go. So it's really difficult, I have to say. So when my clients were tested for COVID-19, they told them their test results, they wouldn't even give them the information. So they asked for the test results sheets. They weren't provided. They literally had to wait to call me because they're on lockdown a lot of the time. So that took days. Then when they contacted me, I had to write a letter to request the results and then wait to get the results. So that way I can put in a motion to have them potentially released early. Now that's several days, if not weeks, we have wasted in order for my client to get the information that he needs so he can fight for his own freedom, so he can fight for his life. And so that is a barrier. And that's one of the issues with this, and the lack of transparency and continuity with getting information and requesting information. So the people that I've seen who've been most successful are the journalists. So talking to the Delegate Chris Hurst and the Delegate Danica Romes, and they are experts in getting information from people who otherwise don't want to give it. And so FOIA requests, talking to the sheriff's office about whatever questions and information that you want from the jails. I mean, I feel like we're entitled to this information because it's a public safety issue. And so that's how I know to go about it, is making direct demands to the jails, to the sheriffs, from the Commonwealth Attorney, to see if they will help lean in on these conversations, making FOIA requests. I mean, that's how you demand the information. But these are some of the challenges and the problems that you have with the lack of transparency and lack of forthcomingness with information.
Can I do a quick follow-up on that? Is there legislative action that we can or should take to make sure that we don't have to wait for individual FOIA requests or things like that? Is there something that we can do to mandate that all prisons and jails release a certain amount of information on an annual basis, or particularly with this COVID crisis, on a weekly basis or something like that?
Yes, so I'm sure that there is. We can actually legislate it. And so that is a bill that could potentially be brought, which, then the intricacies have to be worked out, like when, and is it a particular agency? And then, I think some of the pushback will probably be, well, you'll have to exempt personnel records. And you do have, like, people may ask about HIPAA requirements, because inmates still do have protections, right? And they still do have rights. And so you aren't necessarily able to release particular information or sensitive information about inmates and their personal history, medical history, things of that nature. But there is a way that it can be crafted that we can obtain the information that we need while protecting the other information that shouldn't be released.
Thank you so much, Delegate Foy, for breaking that down. And I hope folks are taking good notes. We aren't just having a conversation. Knowledge is power, and we are being empowered this evening. We ought to come away from this conversation that we have tonight ready to take action. We know that we can support Delegate Foy. We know that we can support Delegate Cole. We know that as they are sharing the ways that we can contact different officials and seek out further information, take notes and then do it. Because we know that we have got delegates who are going to be supporting our pushing for this information being made available, and delegates who are going to be legislating based on all of that information that we collect. We know that we'll be able to share it back with them, because they are two, and not just these two, but there are many delegates, but they can't do all of the work, but there are many of us. So imagine that we all get busy and we do this work, and then we bring it to our activist delegates who are willing to take on the hard fights, and we give them the ammunition to do exactly that. So please, I hope you've got your pen and paper out like I do, and you're taking good notes, and you're going to be getting to work, and we will be doing some of that back leg work for these delegates as they continue to fight on our behalf. I'm about to turn the floor over and allow another question, but quickly, I just want to shout out that Tony McDade, a Black transgender male who was killed in Tallahassee, Florida on May 27th. I want to just make it clear that, Kofi, you said you were triggered when you heard folks trying to say all lives matter. And Delegate Cole, you brought it up first. Thank you for that. But you know what? while all lives do matter, there are particular lives that are in danger. And we would be remiss if we did not call out our LGBTQ plus community. And so I hear you folks on and participating in this conversation right now. And you are absolutely right. I want to call out Tony McDade, the transgender man who was killed in Tallahassee, Florida. His life mattered. And for the other 12 violent deaths, there have been at least 12 violent deaths of transgender or gender nonconforming individuals in the US. And so we just need to call those out too, because the levels of inequity, they just continue to go on and on and on. And we see and we hear every Black and brown individual who is being at this moment in time persecuted. And we are standing and speaking up and taking action. And now I want to go ahead and give the floor to Monica. Yes.
Can I say something real quick on that? I think it was so
Yes.
powerful. I was actually going to mention Tony's name the next time I was allowed to speak, but I think we also have to put focus on while people of color and Black people are disproportionately affected by health issues and the criminal justice issues, we also have to lift up the voices of the Black and the people of color who are part of the LGBTQ issues, LGBTQ community, because they are even more disproportionately affected. And a lot of times it comes from within our own community too. We find out that those people suffer from thoughts of suicide. They are isolated from their families. Their families kick them out because they don't want to have to deal with it or because of different religious beliefs. And so for those of you who are friends and who are allies, it's very important that you pay attention. Yes, it's about Black Lives Matter right about now, but it's also about Black trans lives, Black LGBTQ lives as well, because they are disproportionately affected, and we cannot glaze it over and just lump them in with just Black lives, because they have to have special attention right about now as well.
That's absolutely right. Thank you, Delegate Cole, eloquently spoken. And so, yeah, right now I want to turn it over, Monica. I know that you have a question.
Yes, ma'am. So I just want to start off, first of all, thanking you both just for joining the conversation in midst of all that's going on. So it's definitely been a lot of trauma, I would say, over the last week or so. So definitely thank you for joining for this timely conversation. I'm going to jump to my question real quick, again, with the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. So we've been doing a lot of work in Virginia and are a part of the coalition, the Virginia COVID-19 Justice Coalition. And so one of the things that, as a coalition, that we've been pushing, obviously, is for the immediate release of those who are incarcerated who do not pose an immediate threat to public safety. And I think in Richard's question, he had touched on kind of the, I want to say, soulfulness of getting people released. But in terms of this moment and the COVID-19 situation, I think the inequalities that it kind of raised, how do you see the COVID-19 situation kind of using it to promote criminal justice reform in the 2021 session? And I say that because we've seen, things being considered that maybe we didn't think of for, in terms of considering who should be held pretrial and letting people on geriatric parole and making sure that people who are within a year of their sentencing be released. How can we sustain those reforms? Because the question is, should they have been there in the first place, right? If we say we can release some who's over a certain age or who has certain medical conditions, do they need to be there in the first place? So how can we use this situation to kind of promote and really advance criminal justice reform going forward?
Josh,
So Jennifer is probably going to have the data and all the good information. I'm just telling you how I personally feel. I think what we're looking at, we can definitely use this time and seeing how people are struggling right now. Typically what happens, and this is not the case for everybody, but typically those people who are economically suppressed, they begin to act out on their frustrations. And so what we're going to begin to see is, from businesses being shut down, from curfews being in place, from different things going on, people will begin to act out of their frustrations. And what that will pinpoint and show, if people act out on that, how we have to restore faith and trust in the community, whether it's having access to food, getting rid of these food deserts, making sure we're giving them second opportunities and chances. Because a lot of people, again, are acting out of their frustration and anger. They're not really doing this just because they're quote unquote bad people, or they just want to go out and do a crime spree. They're frustrated with what's going on in their communities. And so that's what's happening. They're being suppressed and they have no other opportunity but to blow up. And so we take a look at this, we see what's going on with criminal justice reform, and we can show all of this has happened right now because people are economically suppressed. They're economically disproportionately affected. And we need to look at this issues of how we're going to address them with criminal justice reform, and then couple that with economic benefits, how we can help them out, get out of that economic struggle that they're in. So that's just me and my personal thoughts. I'll give it over to Jennifer because she'll have the goods on that one.
Yes, thank you. So I think the way that you sustain the progress that we're asking for is you put people in positions of power, you put leaders in positions to lead, people who will be unapologetic and will not, and be principled and will not be swayed, and who are in it for the right reasons, and who have a record of doing what's right, even when it's difficult and uncomfortable. And so that's what I think you have to do. One of the frustrating things for me is, I call myself the real reformer, because now all of a sudden that criminal justice is a sexy trending topic, you have a lot of people who want to come on board. The problem with that, because they do help me get the bills passed, which is fine, but I need you to stay here. I need you to stand with me, even when it's not comfortable, even when the Republican side gets up and tell, a 1 in a million, story of something egregious that happened to one individual. Think about all the tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people who will bear the brunt and the consequences if we don't act in a reasonable, responsible way and focus on criminal justice reform as a tool for rehabilitation and not just retaliation. Because these people will enter into our community. They're going to be returning citizens. And so you have to ask yourself, how do you want them to return? Worse in a, awful situation, worse than when they went in, or better, coming out motivated and prepared for success because we gave them the tools to actually be contributing members of society. Right now, there's some things we can't do, right? We can't change your family, your household, there's some people that systems have just failed them all around. It is so disappointing when I get a child and their parents have failed them, their school have failed them, the systems have failed them, everything has failed them. And we ask that child to be better than every adult and everything that's around them, which is almost an impossibility, right? But we can try. And that should be our goal, right? Should be real diversion programs and fully funding those in a way that makes sense. And actually having first offender programs throughout our Commonwealth of Virginia, and not just for some, but for all. Not for only those people who can afford the fancy lawyer in the sharp suit, but for the person who has $2 to their name. They should get the same type of criminal justice that the person who can afford it have. So that's what it's really about. And so we want people who will ensure that they support and will reinforce early release, parole, clemency, bond, reasonable bond determinations, that someone really owns the fact that if a person is safe enough to release, if they pay $50 and they're safe to release, period, right? And pushing for discretionary release of youth and other concrete ways that we can really improve our criminal justice system and reduce mass incarceration. It's one of the reasons I carried the legalization of marijuana, right? Even though it was much pushback from people in my own party who says, because it goes against our the tough on crime narrative. And I said, I won't take ownership of that, because the 2017 Virginia Crime Commission shows that anything less than legalization does not address the disparities of African Americans, Black bodies being stopped, charged, and convicted for marijuana possession when white usage rates are almost exactly the same. That's the conversations we have to talk about. And that's what we have to lead from. So you have to ask yourself, who's going to be bold? Who's going to be really about real change here in Virginia and speaking up for communities and giving voices to people who've never had them, and representing those vulnerable communities and those marginalized communities in a way that makes sense, and who will be principled about it, who's always stood by her convictions to help lead Virginia forward and ensure that no community is left behind. So that's what it's really about. And when you find those legislators, when you find those candidates, you get behind them, and you get behind them in a real way, not with a tweet all the time, but by making calls and sending postcards and ensuring that they win and they get into office, because that's how we were able to make a lot of the progressive, successes that we had this last session. It's because we forced these other people out of their seats. And it's just as simple as that, right? If I can't convince you to do what's right, if I can't convince you to hear me on this, if I can't change your mind, then I promise you, change your seat. And that is how we make real systemic change.
That's right, right? If we can't get you to do what we need you to do, then we're going to force you to get up and we'll put
Yeah.
someone else in the seat. There you go. I love that. You know, one other thing I just want to mention that you have both said, you both talked about young people in their communities and those communities being so disenfranchised and those young people not having any opportunities. And then we're demanding that they somehow act in ways contrary to everyone around them, contrary to the systems that they have been raised in. And then they get into a system that is supposed to rehabilitate them, but it snatches them and puts them so far away from their families. And it doesn't do anything at all to help that community where they're from. And so I just want to shout you both out for supporting the Healthy Community Secure Care legislation that Rise for Youth put forward, which is looking to do exactly those things that you have both recognized and lifted up as necessary for young people, that we begin to change the environments from which they come so that they have an opportunity to make choices that aren't pushing them up against a wall. And then, you know, when we look at recidivism, if it's over 70% for young people right now at the 3-year mark, we're just creating a pathway right into the adult criminal justice system. So we must stop that. So thank you both for your hard work on that point. And at this, we're at the juncture now that we're going to start hearing from our audience. So the first question that we've got here says, COVID-19 has also shown how broken our incarceration system truly is. And we want to hear from you. How are you going to pressure the governor to use his executive power to release more people? And then how can we, the citizens, how can we get behind your efforts? And what steps can you take to help reform the Virginia prison system? It's a 3-parter.
One of the things I really stand behind is ending the for-profit prison system in Virginia. Currently where we stand, we only have one, if I'm not mistaken, in Virginia, but that's still one too many. So we can go in and put in legislation to end the for-profit system in Virginia. We can keep pressuring the governor, and you all can keep pressuring the governor by reaching out to his office to state that we're way behind in the release schedule for those prisoners, those inmates who are there. We want to make them returning citizens. Like we said, I think Richard stated there was just over 200. The last time I checked, it was under 200. Now we've gotten over 200 out of the 2,000. So we're still behind after we voted for this in early March. In early April to get the ball rolling and send the funding for that. So we're still behind this high time for those people to be released. We've already put the criteria out there of what they have to meet. We've already identified them. We need to go ahead and make sure that the Department of Justice, that Brian Moran, that the governor hears from us and understands to get those released.
Yes, yes. Delegate Foy, do you have any follow-up?
I think that it goes back to a lot of what I just said, you know, basically supporting legislators who are in it for the right reasons, who will do the right things, who are going to put forth legislation, not just vote the right way, but lead on these issues. You know, ask them, well, did you support the resolution that came up so that people right to vote cannot be taken away? It's one thing to restore people right to vote, but what about not even removing that altogether? I've never heard of anyone saying, you know what, I'm cold and I was going to take this jacket, or I didn't because I really want to vote. I mean, it just doesn't enter the equation. It's not proportional punishment. It just doesn't make sense. It was a concerted effort to disenfranchise a large segment of our population who happen to be brown and blacks. So actually, you know, asking those type of questions, where do you stand on cash bail? Right? And do you think that we should have some more pretrial services and diversion programs, and people who are suffering from mental illness emergency should actually be diverted to a hospital and not incarcerated? Do you think we can incarcerate ourselves out of addiction? That is a genuine question that I have. Because if you really truly believe that, then you will support funding substance abuse treatment and counseling, and not necessarily a person sitting in jail for a year or two, then being released right back to the streets and right back to their addiction. Right? So it's about asking the right questions, to vet the right candidates to run for office, to support them to win. And when they get there, holding their feet to the fire to ensure that they pass legislation and carry legislation that's going to move our criminal justice system forward.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. You know, you said end for-profit prison systems in Virginia. You know, the one thing I want to say, when we talk about for-profit, we can look at the state-run facilities and say, it's for-profit that everybody's got to pay to make a phone call. It's for-profit that they can't get things to eat and those kinds of things without having to pay. It's for-profit that children have to pay to call their parents. It's for-profit that parents have to pay child support to the Department of Juvenile Justice. You know, those are issues that need to be completely eradicated. And you know, we are ready to support you and to support our other legislators that are willing to take those tough issues on. The next question here, local Commonwealth attorneys play a huge role in both wielding power and who stays in jail during the pandemic and how a racist police system is perpetuated, including calling officers who have repeat complaints of force or previously lied under oath. So how do we hold those local officials accountable? How is it that we can hold a Commonwealth attorney accountable when they are, you know, not even giving a slap on the wrist to that officer that they know is a bad actor? And when they aren't releasing folks as they should, how do we hold them accountable?
So I guess I'll take that. So I use the County of Arlington as a wonderful example. So I was a public defender there. And I have to say that people, once they were educated and informed about some of the practices that were happening, the fact that African Americans were 8% of the population, but almost 80% of all simple possession of marijuana charges and convictions, they had a problem with that. When they found out that there were murders that happened that weren't truly investigated, in an independent, prompt, and thorough manner, they had a problem with that. I mean, and so what happened was the voters got engaged and they showed up at the polls. And now you have a new Commonwealth attorney, and her name is Marissa Taffety, and she is a prior public defender. She has actually worked on projects to help people who were on death row prove their innocence. So that's what you do. That's real leadership. That's what making change looks like. I mean, just like George Floyd's brother said, I mean, peaceful protest is good and great, but if you want real systemic change, you have to get up and you have to go out and you have to vote. And that's what that looks like. And so that's what I'll say. That's how you ensure that the systems change, because you have the legislators who can change the law, but the implementation of it is through the Commonwealth attorneys. And they have this very strong tool called prosecutorial discretion. And that means they decide who gets charged with what and how many charges. And so that is a lot of power that the judge doesn't even have. And so they are the most powerful person in a courtroom at any given time. And so you have to make sure that the Commonwealth attorneys you have that's representing your jurisdiction represent your values. And so if you want more focus on violent offenses and not so much on simple possession of marijuana, which will be decriminalized beginning July 1st anyway, right? And sometimes has been used as a tool to stop people, especially brown and black people. That's the way to do it. That is exactly the way to do it, is to get motivated, get engaged, and vote for people who are going to represent your interests and make things happen, especially in the Commonwealth seats, because those are some of the most powerful positions in Virginia.
Absolutely, I agree. And one of the things that is always so frustrating is sometimes you find out right after the person gets reelected that they're not who I thought they were. It's extremely important to pay attention to these candidates. And what we're finding out now, and this is where I'm going to put our own party on blast. When we look at what's happening right now in these cities with the protests and different things like that, we have Democratic mayors who are not holding their police departments accountable, and they are having citizens tear gas and being pepper sprayed. And we have to hold our own accountable. If you are a Democrat and you find out that you have a Democrat in office that's not strong enough or not progressive as you think they are, get out and support their primary opponents. Make sure you're doing research and finding out who these people are, not just because your mama told you to vote for them, not because granny always supported them, but you for yourself need to find out the platforms and the histories of these candidates. And if they're not doing what you want them to do, and they may be the particular party you support, find someone or encourage somebody to primary them, or you primary them. It's that simple. I might get some pushback for this when I get back to Richmond, but that's all right.
That's all right.
But we have to ensure that we have the right people who have the heart for our community serving in these seats. And what makes it so hard for good people to get elected is we have politics that is built all around money. The more money you can raise, the more you can get out there in front of people. And so it's important, whether you want to donate to a candidate, maybe you don't have money to donate to the candidate, but get on the doors, get on the phone, get on Twitter, get on Facebook, call Lottie Dottie and everybody and tell them why this is the person and why we need to get them elected. It's that important. And so this is where I stand on my soapbox, and I give a shout out to the governor, because we signed into law automatic voter registration, which will go into effect on July 1st. We pushed that, and I brought that through the General Assembly because I was trying to get a student registered at the University of Mary Washington, and he got sick and tired of dealing with internet issues because we were trying to get him registered online. Then I gave him the paper registration. He was like, I'm not filling that out. And so now we have no excuse. You're going to be automatically registered. You don't even have to check your registration. Get out to the polls and go vote moving forward after July 1st. That's how important it is. And we want to make sure we take all those barriers out the way.
Oh, that is so powerful. That is so powerful. You have both said a couple of things, a couple of nuggets that I just want to lift up one more time. You heard that, right? Commonwealth attorney, often the most powerful person in a courtroom. Know who your Commonwealth attorney is. If that is an individual who is not representing the values of your community, vote them out. Make sure that those with the most power are doing what it is you have elected them to do. They are elected. Don't allow someone who doesn't represent you to sit in the most powerful seat in a courtroom in your jurisdiction. And then Delegate Cole, you just talked about that auto voter registration. Come on, we need to be sure that we are exercising our power to vote. You know, you're right. It's all about money oftentimes. But if we, the people, if we truly do activate and we get out there and we have done our research and we know the candidates and we are putting our voices out there to make sure that others know exactly who's running, and we can all work together to get the right people in the seats to represent us. And the other thing I wanted to mention, you said something about marijuana and how, you know, that has been passed, but see, there was a new crime. There was a couple of new crimes committed specifically for young people. They can now be adjudicated delinquent. So we now have new crimes just for kids in this decriminalization bill. And so we've got to be sure. You talked about 8% of the population, but 80% of the folks convicted and arrested, charged, and convicted. We've got to make sure that we know who is in those seats, because that is what we have to look forward to. Our Black and brown children being now all of a sudden getting criminal records. And I'm not interested in hearing, oh, well, you know, when they turn 18, it all goes away. How about we stop conditioning Black and brown children to be in the justice system? Let's just stop that. Let's just all agree right now that that's unacceptable, and let's do better. All right, I'm gonna get off my soapbox now and I'm gonna get on to the next. Go ahead.
I'll just make two quick points. I'll be remiss if I do not mention Asif with ACLU and Chelsea Wise,
yes,
and Sheila Bynum Coleman, and all of the people who descended down on Richmond to advocate for the legalization of marijuana bill, because they knew the exact sentiments and the points that you were making. And it's not where we need to be. It's not where we need to go. And I am hopeful that in 2021 that we will be able to bring the legalization of marijuana to fruition, because it has been studied. Other states are doing it. We can do it here. And so we can't be afraid to be bold here in Virginia. And that has been one of our biggest opportunities. So I have to definitely shout them out. And also the second thing is, I know a lot of delegates and especially Democrats are looking for Josh Cole's mute button, because when you have truth tellers on the call,
see,
well, yeah, he is not joking when he says he's going to hear it, because, you know, that's the problem. Like I said, you have truth tellers, and he is a truth teller, and he will say what he means and mean what he says, and he'll expose the truth because he's very transparent, and that's who he is. And so I just want to acknowledge that for a second. And that's why I love being on panels and being in the room with this man, because he is not afraid, and he moves like he's unafraid for real change and to speak truth to power. And so I just wanted to give him that big shout out also.
Yes, yes, indeed. Truth to power. Thank you both for speaking truth to power. And you know what? Support the Marijuana Justice Coalition, because they are looking for the equitable legalization of marijuana. Yes, we want it legal, but we want to make sure that we wipe out all of the harms that have been done to Black and brown bodies in the process. You know, all of the war on drugs and every other way that they have used marijuana to criminalize, marginalize, and disenfranchise people of color. So support the Marijuana Justice Coalition as they continue this fight. So let me move on now. The civilian review boards for police, they do not have the power to make real change in Virginia. So first of all of Virginia doesn't even have civilian review boards. So we're going to backpedal just a little bit. There's only 2 in Virginia. We need to make sure that, first of all, everyone has one. So will you advocate to pass legislation that, number one, helps to create civilian review boards where they do not exist? And then that there is real power given to civilian review boards to help them actually hold police officers accountable. We're tired of these gummy bills. That's what I like to call them, because you can gum them to death, but nothing really happens. We need teeth in those gums. And what are y'all going to do to help us get there?
So I'll jump on that one real quick because I came out very early. I'm sure this bill has come up before. I haven't done my research yet, but I'm just stating that I definitely want to put in legislation mandating for all localities and cities within the Commonwealth of Virginia to implement independent community review boards. This is not advisory councils. This is independent community review boards where we gut internal affairs. And we make sure that we put citizens, and you have to have criteria when you put this bill in, that the board has to reflect the demographics of that locality, that there cannot be former or retired police officers on there because that means that they're going to be biased, that you have to make sure that there's a demographics in there as relates to age as well. And so that they're able to communicate and express how they feel from their communities, and that they're actually holding the police officers accountable. And then when police officers are fired or removed from a police department or a sheriff's office in the Commonwealth of Virginia, they should not be eligible for rehire in any other police department or sheriff's department in the Commonwealth of Virginia, or even put a time frame for rehire. And they have to get, they have to be reviewed before that. So we have some ideas. This is just me speaking off the cuff. I haven't reviewed everything I told my LA to put down because I've been shooting ideas to him for the past 3 days. But these are the major ones that are coming to my mind right now.
Right. And I want to ask, I need to toss in a twist. So, and then how do we take a look at Dillon's rule and make sure that it does not keep civilian review boards from having any teeth?
Yeah, so that's what it means. We have to pass it into law, because that's how we will overcome the Dillon rule, where, you know, that's a constant pushback for a lot of jurisdictions who want to do things. And the common complaint will be, well, you can't do it because you don't have the authority from the General Assembly because we live in a Dillon rule state. And oftentimes that's true. I mean, it's ridiculous that we had a jurisdiction have to come to the General Assembly to ask to change the color of their school buses. But that's how severe and extreme it is here in Virginia when we talk about the Dillon rule. So once we pass the independent civilian review board, which I know will happen because there's people in the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus clamoring to carry and to pass some of these bills that we look forward to bringing for the next several sessions to address a lot of these issues, then that is something that we will definitely have built in so we can circumvent the whole Dillon rule issue.
Yeah. I want to acknowledge that we have come to 7:30, and that is supposed to be time for us. That there are so many good questions, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. But I'm wondering, are our panelists, will you be gracious enough to answer just one more question? Awesome. I appreciate you. And then after this question, Kofi, I'm just going to turn it back over to you. So our next question is, one of the steps to dismantle our discriminatory legal system would be to make all juvenile records in Virginia confidential. Is there any real interest in the legislature to make that happen? And what about broader expungement reform? This past session, we didn't see any real criminal legal reform pass, especially for Black and brown people. And, you know, before y'all answer, I just want to say, the whole idea that you seal a record means that it can be unsealed. You know, I'm a proponent of expungement, and then, you know, because that's erasure, and that's what I want to see. So, and now I'm opening it up to you to ask, you know, how can you help us with this issue? Because we cannot keep disenfranchising young people. You know, the very fact that we all of a sudden call them adults because of a particular crime that they commit and then ruin the rest of their life, or that's the intent of the system as it exists now. We have got to dismantle that. How do we go about doing it? How can we support your efforts to do it?
So one of the things I would say is that I would encourage advocating for there to be more diversity on the Virginia Crime Commission. So when you put on the Virginia Crime Commission, who makes recommendations about particular bills and legislation that should go forward, when you have all prosecutors, what type of bills do you think is going to come out and funnel out that? So, you know, until you have people such as your Don Scotts, right, who's a criminal defense attorney, until you have people like myself, who's a public defender, to really be those voices and to hold people honest and accountable for the bills that they're supporting and they're proposing, that's what has to happen. And so right now, the Virginia Crime Commission is comprised of people who either don't practice criminal law whatsoever, or people who are prosecutors. And I'm not saying that all prosecutors are bad, but I think that representation matters. And I think it's important to have people with different perspectives also voicing concerns and giving feedback on legislation that's going to drive the changes here in Virginia. So, I mean, the way that a prosecutor sees things and through their lens is totally different than me. And I bring things to light that I can say the people on the other side may not even think about, especially when we talk about collateral consequences, especially when we talk about equities, especially when you talk about, you know, a lot of the impacts that our, you know, potential defendants and clients and they have when we're just hypothetically thinking of bills. And if you don't practice, oftentimes you don't know how it works. You can conceptualize it, but I know how it is in practice. I see it every day. I touch it, I feel it, I live it, I hug it after a court case. Right? I watch it walk out of the courtroom, you know, and I stand in it every time I have to make a ridiculous argument when we should be coming from an area of rehabilitation and not always retaliation. So that's what I mean when I say this. And so I think to advocate for more diverse voices on Virginia Crime Commission has to be number one. I also think that expungements, I believe almost all that legislation went to study. And so now they're going to study it. And so now we want something to happen. And that has to be clear. And so when these bills come up during General Assembly, I know that everyone can't make it. But let's pick an organization. Let's pick, a person, a point of contact. And their job is to come to these hearings and make their voices heard for these expungement bills. I mean, we even had, to their credit, Republicans put in expungement bills asking for, low-level offenses to be expunged, asking for offenses after 7 years to be expunged. I mean, this is something low-hanging fruit that even they want. So now the Democrats, we have a majority, why are we not doing it? So I would encourage people to continue to advocate. I would continue to encourage people to, request changes on the Virginia Crime Commission to, after these bills have now been studied, now let's have action and, let your voices be heard. Contact your legislators, contact your state senators and your delegates and let them know that this is what you want. And that's how we're going to see these real systemic change. And I will support it. I have supported it. I've put in, there's an expungement piece in the legalization of marijuana bill that was highly supported by ACLU and a lot of other reform organizations, because we do believe there needs to be expungement and not just sealment, such as the one that's in the decriminalization bill, because as Valerie has stated, if it's sealed, it can be unsealed. And we're really talking about justice and equity, then it really needs to go away.
Absolutely. I see one of my constituents on there. I love her. She's a great woman and she's feisty and she's really concerned about criminal justice reform. So, hey, Kimberly, So I think it's very key that we do focus. She stated that you have a lot of Dems who are faking criminal justice reform because, as Jennifer Carroll Foy said, it was a hot topic to jump on. It's the next sexy topic to jump on. And, ooh, we're fighting for criminal justice reform, but let's check your voting record. Your voting record doesn't match up. So we really have to keep on top of our legislators, and especially our colleagues and friends that say they're on our side. And mind you, there are Republicans who are for criminal justice reform. So hold them accountable too. We may not agree with everything they have, but if we can agree on that, let's hold them accountable on that and keep pushing forward. But one of the things that I really wanted to do this past session, and there was a good maybe 5 to 10 bills that I never even got to put in this year that we have still in our drafts. One was total expungement for cases that were dismissed. There are some people who have cases on their records that were dismissed, but they're still on their records. So we want to make sure that those are automatically expunged. And we're not talking about waiting 5 years or 2 years after expunged. Immediately after the judge has passed a ruling that is dismissed, that shouldn't even go on their record. So that's one of the ones we'll be working on. Since we already have the draft, we'll go ahead and file that next session as well. And so I'm looking forward, and my office is always open for more ideas that you may have. And Kimberly will make sure she keeps me updated as a constituent. She's always texting me and always emailing me. So I'm sure she'll give me some great ideas for legislation next session as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Kofi, I know I said I was going to turn it right back over to you, but a couple of things I want to say. You know, we heard mention that we need to get diversity on the Virginia Crime Commission. So if someone could put in the comments, where is it that you go to find out exactly what boards and commissions are available and what seats are available in the Commonwealth? Folks need to know where to go and find that information. And that's how we are going to get the right people in the right seats. Even those places like commissions and boards, we, the people, ought to be filling the community seats, the advocate seats, and the attorney seats. It needs to be us. So I'm hopeful someone please share. Thank you, Jen, for sharing that. Go to that site, find your place, that issue that you are passionate about. I need you to go to that website, find your seat and get in it. Okay. And then the other thing is, you know, will you all advocate for a special session for police reform? We just love to hear your response on that. And for real this time, Kofi, it's to you. Let me just tell you both, thank you so much. How much I have appreciated kind of moderating and being a part of this conversation with you. You are both, like I said in the beginning, you're powerhouses. You are powerhouses. You are about the business. You don't just have powerful words, you have powerful action. And I appreciate you for that. And I just want you to know that I am here. I am supporting. You already know I'll be knocking on your door and calling you and such, but it's because I want to be in the fight with you. And we are grateful for you. So that is my thank you. And after you answer this question about special session, Kofi will take it from there.
So I think that's really great. The governor has already hinted that he would be calling a special session in August dealing with COVID-19 and the budget. And immediately when all of these things happened, I reached out to the Speaker of the House because one thing I love is making sure people understand how politics in Virginia works. The governor calls a special session, but it's the Speaker of the House who sets the agenda for the special session. So once all of this stuff started happening, I immediately reached out to the Speaker. I said, Madam Speaker, I understand the special session is supposed to be about COVID-19 and the budget, but we need to desperately address these issues dealing with police brutality, abuse of power, and racism in that session. And so she heard me. We're going to be talking about it, and hopefully we can get some action and something done sooner and not wait until January.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, and I too also support us having a special session. It's going to be most likely in August. From what I'm hearing, it's supposed to be COVID-19 related because we'll have a fiscal forecast at that point to know how big of a hole COVID-19 has blown in our budget, what our revenues look like, and what programs that we're going to be able to fund and which ones we're not. But I think because of the turn of recent events, and that is, at the top of everyone's mind, I will also advocate for us having conversations and bills and budget amendments that can be proposed during the special session that will address racial equity in a real way. And that, no, we shouldn't have to wait until several more months to bring that forth. So again, people can tweet and they send in emails and they can talk about how this is important, but put your legislation where your mouth is. And I need you to go ahead and allow us to put forth these things now, because there is a sense of urgency. And if you haven't felt it yet, then I don't know where you've been.
Wow. Thank you so much. This has been an incredible discussion. Covered so many topics. I know we originally started off talking about COVID, but we obviously had to address some of the more pressing issues at hand. Again, like I said in the opening remarks, George Floyd, he was not just killed by one single officer. There's a system in place that led that officer to feel like he would be able to get away with it, right? He killed that man while he knew he was being videotaped, right? That just goes to show you just how much he understood, or at least he felt confident that he can get away with it. Like that is a true sense of just how deep rooted our system of racism in our justice system is. And that's really the core of the problem. That's why there's a link between George Floyd and that lady in New York calling the police on that African American male and telling him that there was going to be repercussions because she is letting the police know that there's a white woman calling the police on an African American male. There are deep-rooted issues in our system, and we have to address it all. We have to root out this problem from the heart. Thank you again, Delegate Foy and Delegate Cole. You guys were absolutely amazing. Thank you to all of our to Valerie, Rise for Youth. You did an awesome job. Thank you for all the members of the COVID-19 Justice Coalition. Again, we need everyone to step into this, and the coalition is just a prime example of how coming together we could make change here in Virginia. There are over 15 members of the COVID-19 Justice Coalition. That is really amazing that many people got together to say that we want to be able to get some real change here in Virginia, and that we do understand that there's racial disparities in our justice system that need to be addressed. Take action. Again, we've all heard about how we need to reach out to our elected officials. Do it now. We don't have to wait for an election. Voting is just one way that you can express yourselves. Voting is just one way that you can take advantage of democracy. But in truth, it has to happen year round. If just a third of the people that are out there marching right now would show up and make some phone calls tomorrow, we can get some things done. We don't have to wait until next session. If we want to get a special session, if we want to be able to get some of these issues addressed during the August General Assembly special session, we can make it done if we just make our voices heard in that way. So call up Speaker Philicorn, let her know that we want police issues and reform on the agenda. Right, and we have delegates right here in our midst right now who are willing to make those to write those bills. And if your delegate is just out there posting stuff on social media saying how much they care, but in reality, we need to see the next picture they post on social media of them with a pen and piece of paper in their hand writing some legislation. That's what we need. We don't need your solidarity. We don't even need you marching. We got that. We need you taking some action. All right. Again, there's some specific things that we need to ask for. Release the 2,000 individuals who have been deemed appropriate to be released, so that we don't have unnecessary deaths in our jail right now due to this COVID crisis. Black and brown bodies do not need to perish unnecessarily. Let's push for our police. Let's push for accountability. Let's push for these civilian review panels. Let's push the governor to use his pardon power. So there's a lot that we can do, and there's a lot that can actually happen now. We don't have to wait till January. We don't have to. So we have to get on the phone right now. Say we need that special session. So we need to get them things done. I just want to make a quick plug for another program tomorrow that's going to be dealing specifically with police brutality. I know that we've talked a lot about those issues here, but we're going to go in depth into another program tomorrow that is going to basically go through the arc of what happens with officers, everything from how we need to fix recruiting to make sure we get better officers, how we need to increase training, how we need to increase transparency, and then finally, how we need to increase accountability, right? There's a full arc of issues, and we need to basically look at all of those pressure points to see what buttons we need to press at which intersection of our police system in order to fix it. It's not going to come there's no one magic solution. There are a lot of factors that come into play. So we're going to get into all of that tomorrow. We have an amazing lineup. It's called the Activists and Officers Program, and it's going to feature three activists. Going to be hosted by myself and Valerie Slater from Rice for Youth. Again, Valerie, putting you to work here. And we're also gonna have activist Latoya Wallace from Aba Unity, Ashta Khanna from Virginia ACLU, Chelsea Higgins-Wise from RTAP, and then we're gonna have 3 officers. So both current and retired officers, Alan Davis, who was a retired, spent from the New York Police Department, seen it all, traveled the world, and in training other police officers all through the State Department. He's a historian when it comes to police issues. And we're going to have Sergeant Carol Adams from the Richmond Police Department and the Vernell Adams from retired Newport News PD. And as of about an hour or so ago, we had Steve Descano, who was going to also serve on this panel. And Steve is not just a Commonwealth attorney. His arc, if you will, really spans a lot of these issues. So I got to know Steve personally through the NAACP, and he worked on the Criminal Justice Committee with me and was really kind of a mentor at that time. He also served on our civilian review panel, one of only 2 in the state. So he understands the flaws and how those panels work. And obviously, he as a prosecutor, so he understands the justice system. So he also understands how or why police officers aren't necessarily being held accountable. And now, obviously, he's serving as the Commonwealth attorney. So amazing wealth of information, and we're gonna get it all out of him as much as possible tomorrow. So really excited about that program. We'll post a link to the program as well. It's gonna be tomorrow at 6 p.m. and hope to see a lot of you there as well. So again, thank you so much. Thank you to everyone. Thanks to everyone who's joined. Let's put some of this into action. Thank you.